Today's first reading, we heard that in the beginning, Adam and Eve were naked and without shame. To give a visual of this nakedness and without shame, I have a bowl. That's what I have. This bowl represents Adam and Eve's heart. Their hearts were pure, whole, and spotless. We could say that God's love, symbolized by this water, could be freely poured into their hearts, and they could share God's love with each other. Life was good. But as we heard in the story, Adam and Eve, their hearts were changed. Their hearts became like this bowl. Their hearts became broken and cracked, damaged. Could they receive the love of God? And could they share that love with each other? No. And we too, as we heard in today's second reading, we too are children of Adam and Eve who have inherited the broken hearts that our parents received from their sin. And we too have experienced shame in our life. Just as Adam felt inadequate in his masculinity for failing to defend Eve, men experience the wound of shame often through feeling inadequate. Maybe you were bullied in elementary school, or a girl rejected you in high school, and you feel inadequate in your masculinity and your strength. And just as Eve felt unworthy of God's love after giving in to the temptation of Satan, women experience the wound of shame often through feeling unworthy. Maybe someone called you stupid in elementary school. Or another girl made fun of how you dressed in high school, and so you've always felt unworthy if someone says you look pretty or smart. Whatever your experience has been, these are just a couple of hundreds of experiences. The truth is, men and women, all of us are broken in one way or another. Some are broken more than others, but for each one of us, we have our own stories of brokenness. And the pieces of our lives no longer fit together in a unified way. We all have shame in our life. And the tragedy of why I bring up the topic of shame is not so much that we have it, because it's something we often just receive and we didn't intend to, but it's the effects of how we react to shame. That's why I'm bringing it up, because of how devastating the effect is of how we react to shame. So I'll summarize it again in the classic two responses: fight or flight. To go back to the broken bowl, due to original sin, one way we react to shame is to fight. We take the broken pieces of our lives and we try to defend ourselves from getting hurt. And the other way is to flight. We try to hide the brokenness, pretend it doesn't exist anymore, so that no one can spot it and judge us. This is what Adam and Eve did in the garden. In today's first reading, they took flight. They sewed fig leaves to hide themselves and went into the bushes, and they did fight as well. They pointed the finger and blamed each other. And these can be our two responses as well. For men, one way we fight against feeling inadequate is by getting angry and criticizing others. It's an act of trying to make yourself feel superior and not inadequate compared to another man. It's classic armchair quarterback syndrome, pointing the finger. It's an attempt to try to prevent the pain of shame. And women, Brene Brown says, one way women fight against feeling unworthy is trying to do it all and do it perfectly. You take everything into your control, so there's no time for self-care because you're in control. That's a way that women try to fight against feeling unworthy. And both men and women, a common way we fight, try to hide the brokenness, is by shutting down our emotions, avoiding vulnerability, and going to what the culture provides us for escape. So we run away from reality and we escape to fantasy. Whether that happens through alcohol, drugs, social media, video games, or pornography, these are all ways we escape from reality and go into the fantasy worlds to avoid any pain. Brené Brown, some of you watched her famous TED Talk on shame. She says, we have to talk about shame. We have to bring it up because of how devastating this is on our lives if something is not done. Brené Brown says this: shame is highly correlated with bullying, aggression, addiction, depression, suicide, and eating disorders. Highly correlated. So the more shame in your life, the more sense you have of feeling inadequate, unworthy, and the more you do the fight and flight responses, the higher chances you have of engaging in bullying, aggression, addictions, depression, suicide, and eating disorders. And so she brings up this topic to say something needs to be done. We need an intervention, or else it's going to keep causing more and more problems for ourselves and for other people. It's going to drive us further into inadequacy, unworthiness, and eventually despair. And so that's why she brings it up. That's why she's so popular today, because someone's finally speaking about it, and that's why we're bringing it up today as well. We know that Jesus is our Savior, and that means he wants to save us from everything, including the wound of shame. When we look at why Jesus came into this world, one of the reasons is to heal our wounds of shame. And I'll explain it through another bowl. This bowl, it looks a little different if you can tell. This bowl I did together, it's my art class, Kintsugi pottery. This is a Japanese art, 400-year-old art, in which Kintsugi means golden repair. So you might see some gold inside there. So the Japanese art of what they do is they take broken pottery and they use this lacquer mixed with powdered gold, think of like golden glue, and they piece back broken pottery. Now the philosophy behind Kintsugi pottery is that each piece of pottery has its own unique story thanks to the brokenness of the piece. But as a result of the golden glue putting it back together, each piece has its own unique beauty as well. So its own unique story and its own unique beauty. We often just want to throw away broken pottery. But Kintsugi pottery says no. There's a story to it, and there's a beauty to it. All it takes is golden glue. This gives probably my favorite image of what Jesus came to do. Look at the cross right now. That is God himself gathering together all of our broken stories. Look at the cross. Inadequacy, unworthiness, feeling despised, ugly, worthless. That was the most shameful death a Jew could have, in which they thought everyone rejected this man, and the most shameful death the Romans could give someone. Jesus took it on. God himself took on all of our experiences of shame. He gathered all of it together, all of the broken pieces. He didn't throw away our brokenness. He gathered all of it together. And by his resurrection from the dead, God's love transformed it. We heard in today's second reading that the sin of Adam does not even compare to what God did. Jesus' love is far greater than the sin of Adam. It tells a far greater story than the sin of Adam. And so God's love became golden glue to piece us back together. So when Jesus rose from the dead, he went back to the apostles. Just think about it. These apostles, what were they experiencing? Shame. So much shame. They just lived with Jesus for 3 years, saw hundreds of miracles, and they betrayed him. The amount of shame that they felt in their identity. I'm not worthy to be an apostle. That must have what all of them were saying. I'm not worthy to be Jesus' friend. I'm not worthy to be his disciple. They must have felt so much shame in their inadequacy and unworthiness of who they were. But Jesus came. Did he have open wounds of shame to show them? No. They were healed. They were now scars. He showed them his scars. He says, look at what God's love has done. Like the golden glue of God's love, he proclaimed to them the transformation that happened, the story and the beauty of what God's love had done. And he wasn't just doing it to show and tell. He was doing it to invite them in to experience transformation as well. And how did he do it? What did he do? The Gospel of John, chapter 20. What did he do? He said, receive the Holy Spirit. The sins you forgive are forgiven. The first thing God did after rising from the dead is he gave the apostles the sacrament of reconciliation. Go to the Gospel of John, chapter 20. The first thing he did. Why? Because he knows how much shame they were experiencing and how badly they needed to experience healing. And so Jesus set up a way for them to experience healing through the sacrament of reconciliation. And ever since, this same power that Jesus gave the first priests after he rose from the dead has been passed on from one generation to the next, from one priest to another, all the way to today. And so the same power of Jesus' love transforming the apostles, in which the only reason we know their stories of shame is because they experienced transformation. That same story has been passed on from generation to generation to today. And the same power is available to each one of us to experience healing from our shame. This is my story. I experienced a lot of shame growing up. I remember in elementary school, I was made fun of for how I looked. I had a big head in elementary school. I was called names in elementary school. And I tried to fight against that by being successful. And I was successful. I played college golf in the States. But I was so driven to succeed that it ruined the gift of golf as a game to be played. It became my way to prove myself to the world. Any men here like that? You're just trying to prove yourselves to the world right now? Underneath that drive to succeed, there's probably a reaction against feeling inadequate. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm trying to reveal the brokenness. And when that didn't work, when the fight response to shame didn't work, it was flight. I took flight to everything the culture provided for me. Alcohol, drugs, you name it. But thanks be to God, I had an experience in confession. And I didn't just go to a priest and say, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned, and just list off the bad actions and say, okay, I'm done. No, for some reason, I opened up my brokenness. I told these priests the stories of my life, of my brokenness, of what had happened. I opened up my heart. I opened up all of it. And I've been to confession hundreds of times since. And I continually experience a transformation in which the only reason I can share with you my brokenness is because it's no longer like this. It's no longer like this, where it hurts other people. It's like this, where I can tell you the story about my brokenness in golf because God's love has pieced me back together. Obviously, I'm still a work in progress. I went to confession 3 days ago, and I realized that when I was going to confession, often I just have my list of sins, and I just leave it like that. I just check the box, and I move on. But as I was praying through shame this week, I realized I need to open up my story again. And so I went to Monsignor Greg, a priest that I trust, face to face, and I just opened up my story again. I said, these are the ways this is why I'm so impatient right now. Why I feel like a perfectionist. Because I'm still being healed from my past. And I opened up the experiences of shame and how I fight against it sometimes and how I fight against it other times. But I opened up this to him, and because he loves me, because I trust him, there was a real experience of healing again. And he shared with me how God's at work in my life. And I started to see, it was like golden glue again, piecing me back together. Because I continually get broken again, right? It's like continual broken. God pieces me back together, tells an even greater story. It's like continual breaking, and God uses so much golden glue on me, right? And it's so available for every single one of you. So, my challenge, one challenge, go to confession this Lent. Not just to check the box, to open up your story. Go deeper. Go deeper about your story. For example, like I shared, say you struggle with impatience as a mother. Open up your story. Why do you think you might struggle with impatience? Maybe that's a part of your story. Maybe your mother was impatient with you. Maybe you put such a high value on being the perfect mom that if your kids don't get it right, it hurts you. Jesus knows that part of your story, and he wants you to open up about that part. Don't just check the box. Open up. Share your story. Confession's meant to be a sacrament of healing. And if we can open up our stories and give Jesus all of our brokenness, then slowly but surely, like this bowl of Kintsugi pottery, we'll start to realize that, hey, yeah, I still remember my brokenness, but now my story's been pieced back together with God's love. And guess what? It's even more beautiful now for having been broken. And God's love can be poured back into my heart, and maybe I can start sharing out of that gift to other people. So, men and women, you no longer have to fight or flight from feeling your shame. You can invite Jesus in. He's waiting for you in confession, and he wants to transform your life. He wants to heal you, and he wants to transform your life so that you have a story to tell of God's love for the world.